Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Gillian, and today's conversation is one I've been so looking forward to sharing with you.
Our guest this episode is Dr. Anita Collins. And if you teach music, chances are you already know her name. Anita is an internationally recognized researcher, educator, and writer in the field of brain development and music learning. She's the author of The Music Advantage, the creator behind the Bigger, Better Brains work, and she has spent years translating the neuroscience of music learning into language that parents, teachers, and policymakers can actually use.
Yeah, she's having a profound effect, of course, on the world, really. Paul and I had the privilege of hearing Anita speak recently at Top Music Live, which was held in Sydney. And that was a big celebration of Tim Topham's 10 years in business and really serving the piano teacher community. It's been amazing. And gosh, I just walked out of this session with just pages of notes and a long list of things I wanted to think more about carefully, and particularly around executive function and exactly what's happening with our students' brains in this very screen-saturated world they're growing up in. We talk about how this generation of children is really different, not in the ways we might assume, but in ways that matter enormously for how we teach them.
Yeah, I know. It was just fantastic, wasn't it? What I really love is hearing her thoughts about how these digital devices and, that dopamine hit our students get are affecting not just our students' concentration spans, but in other areas of their lives. And why the executive function skills simply aren't developing the same way for them as they have when we were kids and in previous generations. In some ways, they are so much more sophisticated, and then in other ways, they are more mentally and socially fragile. And that really does have an effect on them as learners.
Part I really love the most is where Anita unpacks why music learning, or learning a musical instrument specifically, is uniquely placed to give children the very thing devices are taking away. And that, actually, we might be one of the most important parts of their education, particularly going forward, as even AI and VR, virtual reality, and all this kind of stuff comes in.
Whether you teach one-on-one, in groups, or in a classroom, I think you'll come away with a fresh sense of just how important the work you're doing really is. So settle in. Here is Gillian's conversation with Dr. Anita Collins.
Welcome, Anita.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's so exciting to hear you speak once more, and the deep thinking that you do about where music education is going, and all of your research that you've shared about what actually is going on, because this is such a different generation than we. And look, as you made the point, every generation is different, and we are not different. We are different to our parents' generation and the generation before. And it seems like there's such a significant change.
Yep.
And what do you think the role of digital devices has had? What do you think the influences are?
Yeah.
It's
They've changed our world so much and in so many different ways. Like I marvel at it every sort of day and every moment. I can be sitting with our family and someone says something and we go, hang on, let's check that, or I don't know about this, or what's happening today? And that availability of knowledge, I think, is an absolutely wonderful tool if used really, really well.
Yes.
I think devices are very, so what I'm looking for, they're very complex, and the ability to use them requires us to have very high executive function, to actually make choices about when we put things down, when we're watching something that is leading us in a certain direction, then we don't want to go in that direction. What action do we take? And that's a really hard step for children, particularly teenagers, to take. They just get sucked into it. So I think it's a wonderful tool for knowledge and communication and all sorts of things. But I do think it's going to require us as humans to grow again, to learn again how to make really responsible decisions. And then when it comes to our children, we have to guide them through those decisions so they have those skills. And I think we're just a little bit behind the eight ball at the moment. And I think we need to be more explicit and more responsive, and we really need to have parenting conversations, not about whether they do or don't have the device, but how do they use the device because they're not going to go away.
I think that that executive function that you speak about, we have it because we developed it before the devices came along.
Absolutely.
So we are kind of like a little bit like that, even though we can't do it as quickly and all the rest of it, because they're kind of natives to us. Like they were born with a chip in their brain to some extent. But we have that, and we can see it from perhaps a higher thing, but they're just immersed in it.
Yeah, and that's the immersion part of it. Is I think we have to think of new ways. It's not a don't do it or do it.
No.
It's not so black and white. It has to be, how do you work with this? What do you do?
Yeah.
When is it good for you? When is it bad for you? How is it affecting your behavior?
Yeah.
And the part that comes into it, is that dopamine hit that and anyone knows if they're taking an iPad off a 4-year-old who's had it for a long period of time, they have withdrawal. It's literally addiction withdrawal. Yeah. And as soon as we start talking about it like that, and I think if we're open about it, that means we can start having conversations about, right, how do we deal with this? And what other experiences do they need to have in their lives? And this is where I believe music learning comes into it. That balances the device use and learning on devices.
Yes, you mentioned that is the pendulum. And I've actually pondered this question myself with AI coming in and so much digitization. Is there going to be this equal value or understanding that we do need this organic thing, like music making, in our lives as well, because it activates many, many things that the digital devices don't do, and they've used the tools and the rest of it. And so is there going to be a time where music, learning music and us as musicians are revered all over all of us?
Yeah.
Let's hope there's a golden age coming.
I'm a student of history and just watching what the pendulum does. And to me, that's really interesting. It's like we do this one thing and then we go and do another thing. And it's exactly the same amount of pendulum swing. So for me, AI, amazing tool, has amazing implications. I actually think it's enough of a push of the pendulum. And there's already talk of the fact that we will swing very much back to in-person analog experiences because they're going to be super important for us to remain human.
Yes.
And I think everyone talks about, this happened and humanity's going to be wiped out. And it's like, we haven't wiped ourselves out yet. So we're pretty good at adapting. There's a lag, and I think we're in the lag at the moment of going, we're just not quite sure what this thing is. We don't know how we're going to use it. But I actually think it's enough of a swing so that coming back to in life, real life, in-person activities that are hard are going to be valued even more because so much has been made easy.
And if, I agree with you. I think there's just different jobs are going to open up. We're not going to, so I do think that. And yes, it is going to take away some of the jobs and all the rest of it, but I think different opportunities.
But we no longer have chimney sweeps. Like, the technology changes everything. Yeah, exactly.
So, however, if for some reason, although this isn't remember, I even think decades ago, they predicted that our work week was going to kind of go down, right? And it hasn't really. No. So, but even if it did, I was thinking the same thing, that maybe this kind of, all right, well, all this digitization's all around us and it's running stuff. Yeah, that then frees us up to have the time to do and investigate art, dance, more the artistic side, and really, and sport and things that are truly only we can do.
But I think what's going to happen is we're not, at the moment, we see that as what we do in that extra time. So we've got 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, and the extra 8 hours is that extra thing we do. And I think it's going to shift to being, these are vital things that come into what we would have considered a work week, because we understand that they're enhancing us cognitively and physically, and that enhancement will then lead to how we manage and utilize AI. So I think I think there's a shift coming, that we're going to have it into it's going to be seen in a different way, and not so much as a hobby. If you've got time, or a hobby, rather than I'm doing this today, it's like a meeting with myself, which is my practice, because I know that it's going to enhance my cognitive function. and that's then going to help me do my work.
Yeah.
So
There's AI, well, at the moment, although this could change, it's all about this whole prompting thing, isn't it? Like, you've got to get even better and better, and more the higher up you can chunk yourself into prompting, the greater response that you will get out of AI.
Yeah.
So perhaps this is part of
and
that.
to ask the good questions and the creative questions. And I think that
executive function.
Very executive function, very higher order thinking, all those things that music learning. But the brain was built in a non-digital time. So we have to keep going back to this is actually how the brain learns. It learns through repetition. It learns through doing challenging things. It learns through working through hard situations and having success at the end. And there is no other way to grow a brain. You can't do it digitally. You have to do it through the mechanisms for which it was created in the first place. And I think that's for me why I can really see the pendulum is far enough this way, so it's going to shift far enough that way.
So let's talk about the challenges teachers are having today with the young child. Well, actually, not even young child, it's really the generation alpha, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what are the things you pointed out? Everyone is noticing the short attention spans and whatever. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the big things that came out of thinking about this keynote, because I always like to pick a topic I don't know the answer to, because that forces me to do the thinking, to go, well, I have a date and I have to do this thing and I've got to get up and say something. But the things that came out for me was being comfortable with discomfort.
Yes.
Is a challenge that they have, not because they don't want to, it's because they have not had enough exposure to it. Being able to manage their attention span and recognize how they're being, what their brain is doing. So becoming friends with their brain, really.
So have you got any tips about that? Because that's a big thing that lots of teachers are saying, the attention span of a nap, they just really can't focus for very long.
Yeah.
So is that, in one way, doing the chunking, small chunks, let's perfect the small chunks, because that also feeds into the other thing, the perfection and what have you, quick wins and what have you. So we're kind of playing into it.
Yes. I know where you're going with it. So for me, it's like, I think, yes, we're playing into it, but I think the bit of the conversation that we're not having is showing them the long-term picture. So they're seeing through their devices and everything as the short-term picture all the time, and they're not being forced to think long-term, which is something like, here's a piece and you have an exam in 6 months' time. That's long-term for any student. And to go, okay, let's work backwards. When do you really want to have it cooking? I want to have it in the week before. Okay, so what do we need to lead to get to cooking? And that brings us back to, week 1 of the term that we're in, and we're sort of going, okay, well, now we've got how are we going to work through this? So we still go back to the small bits, but we keep it in perspective of the big picture. I think what's happening at the moment is they're only seeing small bits and there's no big picture for them.
We see the big picture.
Yes, but we don't help them see
it with them.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's tricky about being a music teacher is we've seen it work so often. We have faith, because we've got faith through experience that we know it's going to work. But we sometimes forget that our students haven't had as much experience as us and they need proof. And I think that's a big thing that I'm seeing with a lot of particularly teenagers is like, show me the proof. They've been taught, where's the evidence? And I think we need to do a bit more sort of evidence gathering and showing for them to go, here's big picture, and then we're going to work back from here. So where do we want to be? And where's the wiggle room when, you get sick or you've got assessments or you've got, let's build all that stuff in.
Some wiggle room. Because otherwise anxiety comes into play here.
Absolutely. It's like, I'm not where I need to be.
Downward spiral.
Yeah. But think of what a wonderful tool we're giving them through music is we're going, here's this 6 planning. But also planning that's really realistic. It's like you're not going to get better every week. Yeah. You're going to get better for 3 weeks and then you're going to plateau or you're going to go downhill. Or you will get sick. You will have assessments. You will have
and if you don't, or something. Great, that's a bonus.
I know, but let's plan for the stuff we know that's going to happen. Yeah. And I think the more I've done that with students, the more I've actually seen that the light really turns on and they grab hold of this tool. All they need are frameworks, and we have a tendency to go, we know it's going to work, just believe in me. And they don't need it. They need more than that. Yeah, that is scaffolding. And
so do you think that works with the little, 8-year-olds as well, the 8 and 9-year-olds? Yeah.
I think we should start it in preschool, Basically, it's age appropriate.
Yes.
So basically, in preschool, it's what's the
a safety
consequence of doing that, or what do you think happens if we did this? Like getting them to forecast or imagine actually starts that decision-making process.
Do you think that we had it a little bit as kids and they don't have it, that they're not, think that things have changed, or do you think they just need this kind of certainty a bit more?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's probably a bit of both. I think, thought about how my upbringing was when I was younger and parenting at that time. It was very structured. You do this and you do this. This is your expectation. This is the lane you go in. You don't go out of it. When you do, there's a consequence. The consequence is usually quite significant. It's like the walls along my bowling alley were quite high, and I knew exactly where they were.
And that parents were more strict.
They were far more black and white.
Yes, more black and white.
Now, it doesn't mean parenting now is bad. It's no good and bad. It's just we're different and we've evolved. I think in preschool, we've moved to a play-based learning, which I believe is really good, but it may have, again, that pendulum may have swung in some contexts a little bit too far, and there needs to be a balance of play and structure. If they've only got very, very play-based stuff, then they hit school and suddenly they hit a whole bunch of structures which they're not really ready for and they haven't been prepared for. So again, when you then lay music learning over the top, that's a structural thing that is a bit of a shock to them. And I think what it is it's just a little bit of a shock, and it's a little bit too far from where they currently are. And I think I think that's what I was exploring in my talk was, if we're moving, if we understand where they are, we can move them towards where they need to be. But if we don't recognize where they are, then we're at an impasse. So I think that's the main part of it.
Yes. And I think also the children have got this kind of need. You're talking about the need for perfectionism. There was two
Praise junkie.
two P words. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because some of that, I think it came up in the session, that sometimes with the parents, and I know this is myself with raising my kids, you hate to see them. It's agonizing to see them struggle.
Yeah.
They have to struggle, but sometimes it's hard.
But that's absolutely correct. And that's not changed through all of millennia of parenting, absolutely. But I know this might be very controversial, but it's like, by us taking away the pain of our children, we're actually taking away our own discomfort. So we're not comfortable to sit in discomfort.
Yes.
Because we're watching them sit in discomfort. So whereas I feel like both parenting but the experience of the world was a little bit different, a couple of generations ago, where it was like, I know that this discomfort is very important for my child. It might make me feel uncomfortable, but the overriding thing is I'm doing the right thing for them. Whereas now we've changed a lot of our styles. We've changed how we experience our everyday life. Things have shifted. And again, all I think is we're going to shift into the next phase.
Yeah. I really love the analogy or the example that, put the quick fix about the church, going to church.
You go to church.
Which is sitting in discomfort.
Sitting in discomfort and getting in trouble. I think there's a lot of, and again, and he talked about it, and he said, it's an hour. You sit there for an hour. Your bum gets numb. You're uncomfortable. You're hungry.
You're bored.
But you have to work through that. And it's such an interesting idea for me of like, how often do we get kids? Even if you think about assemblies or we don't. Concerts are shorter and all sorts of things just to make sure that people can actually come. And they're good choices. But kids don't have to sit in discomfort for a long period of time. And while we wouldn't choose to do that for ourselves either, we can all think back to a point where it's like, I had to do this thing. It was awful. It went for hours, but I made it through and I learned something in the process.
So, and I thought that was interesting, again, back onto short attention spans and the reading thing, that books are getting shorter. Graphical novels. What's going on?
Well, reading is such an interesting one because we are asking children to begin reading around the age of 5 and 6, which cognitively is very likely to be too early, by about a year or 2 years sort of thing. So
beginning reading.
Yeah, beginning reading. And then we think about all the experiences they might not be having, which is getting them ready for reading.
Yes.
So we're sort of behind the 8 ball to start with, and then we have people producing amazing literature, but it's in a very different format to cater to what the students are able to digest and understand. And then when we ask them to do the big reading, which they should do, you know, they get to their Great Gatsby or whatever, and you've got to actually, or the Shakespeare, and actually sit and think through these things. It's asking them just that little bit more. I mean, I think we forget about how much energy it takes to sit in high levels of discomfort. But if we made them only small levels of discomfort, it takes less energy, they're more willing to do it. So I think it's just adjusting that, which might actually help us with our day-to-day teaching and practice and raising children, all those sorts of things.
I just thinking, you know, when you brought the reading idea up, you know, traditional piano is read, play, and if you can't read it, then you're not allowed to play it almost.
Yes, exactly.
It's the gateway. It's always been the gateway. And I think there's this huge tsunami of growing realization that actually we probably need to be doing some other things and off-bench activities and things like that, which are really important as well. So, it's interesting about the reading, that it's even getting harder to teach by reading.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then you've got ways that actual reading of literature or language happens at school. And reading music and reading language are, you know, in the same neural highway in the brain. So there's all these sort of other elements that are coming into it. So I feel like in some ways music learning is a bit of a barometer of how kids are going and how education is going. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because it can be this mechanism which enhances it, but also can be a mechanism that tells us when are things, you know, potentially not going the best for the students, to prepare them always for the future. And it's not to be a musician, it's just to prepare them for the future.
And I really think this, you know, everything you've been speaking about is just so important for us to perhaps highlight to parents, because if they understood all of these things, perhaps in those harder, you know, the ups and the downs, and the downs, they would see those through.
Yeah.
So your work is in Bigger Better Brains.
Yes.
And everyone can find that on biggerbetterbrains.com.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you have, is it a membership?
Yep, we have. So I produce a huge number of advocacy tools, things that you can just quickly hand out to people or put online or add into a newsletter or something like that. And it's my way of taking the research and making it accessible to as many people as possible. And that's really, really important to me, that any teacher at any time can search for something and go, I really need this to give to this one parent who's telling me that they're giving up piano because they're not, you know, they need some more time at home to do, you know, reading practice or something like that. But hang on, these two things are intertwined.
Yes.
To, you know, if you work in a school, something that might happen there, which is like, okay, let's talk about the larger program. What are the reasons that we need to make sure that music stays front and center? So, yes, there's a membership that
all
has all of that.
Drip feed also, as Anita to be the newsletter on our websites and things like that. Constant drip feed to be reminding them.
Yes.
Because it's not just one isolated instance. Sometimes by the time they've come to speak to you, they've already made their decision. So we're going to be feeding them.
Yeah, it needs to sort of, I like to think of it as a campaign.
Yeah.
And it's a campaign of sharing information, and it just needs to be every single week. What am I putting in the newsletter? What's going home on the bottom of that, on my email? What am I sending? And just this, as you said, drip feeding. And people don't read everything.
No.
Or don't see everything. So you need to make sure that there's things out there. Yeah, exactly. So I also try and do things that are very bite-sized and very recognizable, so people go, oh, there's that thing again. Oh, there's that thing again. And about the seventh time they go, oh, there's this thing. I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to read what that's about. And I think it's working because I talk to a lot of parents and a lot of schools that they have more knowledge now and more language around what's happening for music and the brain in particular, and therefore why it's valuable. And I think that's really good, and we can just keep building on that.
Yeah, terrific. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you.
What a conversation. I could honestly have kept talking with Anita forever. A few things we want to leave you with this week. The first is a reminder Anita gave us that children in front of us are not broken, and they're not a lesser version of the students we used to teach. They're a different generation growing up in a different world with brains that are being shaped by the experience none of us had at their age. Our job isn't to wish that away. Our job is to meet them where they're at and to offer them something the devices can't.
And the second is the role we play when Anita talks about executive function, about focus, about impulse control, about the ability to hold a goal in their mind and work towards it. She's describing the exact skills our students build lesson after lesson after lesson at the piano. And that's not a small thing. That is quite literally brain-shaping work that we're doing, and it matters now more than it ever has.
And the third, Anita's research proves that what you do as a piano teacher isn't just piano lessons. You're doing something that can have a profound effect on your students' lives for the rest of their lives.
So if you enjoyed today's episode and it resonated with you, we'd love it if you'd share it with a teacher friend or with a parent in your studio who would benefit from hearing about it. And if you want to dig deeper into Anita's work, head to biggerbetterbrains.com and we'll put the link in the show notes along with her book and her TED Talks.
And if you like today's episode, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the platform you're on know that you'd like to see more. And if you'd like to make sure that you get each new episode or blog when it's released, just go to our website, pianoteachingsuccess.com, click join the newsletter list, and we'll make sure you never miss an episode or free resource again.
Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.